The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, and welcome to the Service Desk Institute, the 8 most common metric mistakes and how to fix them. I'd just like to welcome Daniel Wood here today.
Hi Rob, hi everyone, thanks for joining us today, great to have you here.
And he's going to go through and talk about the metrics and the mistakes that are being made. If you do have any questions, we'll try and get through to them at the end, so feel free to just pop any questions on the right hand panel. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand you over to Daniel and speak to you at the end of the webinar.
Thanks Rob, and once again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, great to have you here. If you do have any questions, as Rob said, please use your questions pane on the right hand side of your screen. The last webinar we ran, which was last month, we had loads and loads of questions. We actually had to spill them out onto the SDI blog. So if you do have any questions, we will get round to them either during this webinar or through the blog. Talking of blogs, that is exactly where this webinar came from. The 8 most common metrics mistakes was a blog post that I put up probably about a month ago. It tended to create quite a lot of interest, so we thought we'd run a webinar off the back of it and provide some more content for you on this most fascinating of topics. And it is fascinating, there is no sarcasm in my voice whatsoever. Okay, for anyone who isn't aware of the Service Desk Institute, we're a membership organisation for the service desk industry, produce lots of research, have our own standards, and if you'd like to go and find out some more information or to pick up your free research, go and visit our website and it's all there for you. Okay, so today's webinar, very simply, is going to be talking about the 8 mistakes. There really isn't much beyond to the structure beyond that, really. We're just going to go through the 8 mistakes, find out what's commonly happening on service desks, and then I'm going to come up with some ways to fix them. If anyone has their own suggestions or own mistakes that they've identified, please do use the questions pane. We're really trying to make this webinar as interactive as possible. I'm sure no one just wants to kind of sit there idle listening. Please do get involved. It makes the content so much richer for absolutely everyone. So let's start off with a man on a bike. Measuring too much. This man has had too much, and there are also too many metrics out there. There are potentially thousands and thousands of metrics that we could be measuring on the service desk. And I've seen some really bad examples of people who try to measure just too much without any thought or any consideration of what they're actually measuring, what it actually means for them. So there are loads and loads of metrics, there are loads and loads of different terms for metrics. We can call the same metrics lots of different things, which is always lots of fun when you're auditing and you come up with a new metric and you think, wow, I haven't seen this one before, and actually it's just an amalgamation of some other metrics or just a different way of describing a commonly used metric. So there's loads and loads of metrics out there, but there definitely is the potential to measure too much, and that's why it's listed as a mistake. The 1 to 8, by the way, is not in any kind of order in terms of severity or mistakiness. It's just there for a guide. So measuring too much sits at number 1 because there are so many metrics out there, and we don't want to get bogged down, too consumed, and too metric overweight fat like this man on the bike. Number 2, measurement for measurement's sake, and really this plays quite a lot into number 1 on our list. When we're thinking about metrics, it's really tempting to come up with as many metrics as we can. A real kind of quantity over quality dilemma faces us all because there are just so many metrics out there. It's really tempting to measure loads of things and think we're measuring this so we can kind of control it, we understand it, we know it, but often that isn't true. Oftentimes I find that people are measuring just for the sake of measuring a metric. Maybe it's a historical thing, maybe it's a legacy from someone else who has been there, maybe you're thinking this is just what I should be doing, service desk should be measuring this metric, I'm going to measure it, I don't really understand it, I'm not sure where the data is being pulled through from, not really sure what it tells me, but it's something I think I should be doing. This shows that I'm doing a good job, I'm measuring this, so therefore it must be the right thing to do. The reason it's number 2 on the list as a mistake is that you can measure things just for the sake of measuring and it's not providing any real value. My advice would be when you're looking at any kind of metrics to measure would to go back to basics and actually ask, what is this metric telling me? What is the value that I can derive from measuring this metric? How is this going to tell me something I didn't know before? How can I use this information in a beneficial and important way to help drive our service forward? So always when we're thinking about metrics, come back to that fundamental question of what is the value of doing this. And a theme that might continue later on in the webinar is that metrics can be very time consuming. They require a lot of effort and dedication to actually report on them correctly. So make sure that when you are measuring them, that your investments in energy and effort are actually put into the right things and that you're measuring things that matter. Okay, so that was number 2. Number 3 on our list of metrics mistakes is not using graphs, and this is a really common mistake that I see. So we collect loads of data, we're very good at mining it, fishing it out of whatever receptacles it might be in disparate parts of the system. We bring that all together, we create these lovely metrics reports, and then we leave them in a spreadsheet, or we just leave some scattered numbers around. And to be quite honest, they're not really going to mean anything to anyone beyond probably the person who put them together. Graphically displaying metrics is probably one of the most important things that you can do. It's certainly a fundamental part of our standards when we look at performance measures, and it should be a vital component of everything that you do in terms of reporting on your service desk. Graphs provide a really visual visual way of displaying information, and they show you exactly how your performance is changing over time. So as a little example, I've put together a graph for you today that is one that we would definitely advocate that you use when we look at the certification. So as you can see, we have our data there through the column graphs. Along the top we have a goal, so we can see how we're trending. We can kind of come back to goals a little bit later on. But also we have that black line there, which is our trend. So actually we can see how our performance is changing over time. We've got a nice year panned out at the bottom on the horizontal axis, so we can see exactly how we're doing over time. And as we can see, and this graph shows us, that the number of incidents logged is actually going up over time. We're currently exceeding our goal, so it's going to be time to revisit that goal and actually see if we need some extra capacity or resource on the service desk to cope with all these incoming calls. Now you could display that simply in a spreadsheet, and that would tell you the same thing. But in terms of making a visual impact, and especially when we come to sharing and disseminating metrics, something we're going to talk about later on, it's absolutely fundamental that we find a clear, concise and engaging way to display this information. And for me, a graph such as this, really simple, really clear, really clean and crisp, well, I would say that because I made it, really does tell you a lot of information very quickly. It explains exactly what's going on, and it provides a great visual snapshot. And that's not just for your own benefit and the people on your service desk, but also for the rest of the organisation as well, and any other interested parties, including your end users and customers. So mistake number 3 would be to not use graphs when thinking about metrics. Always try and think in the most engaging way that you can display information. Number 4, and again it ties very nicely into what we've just been talking about, is a failure to set goals and targets. And actually thinking about it a little bit more, it does lend itself to number 2 as well, measurement for measurement's sake. When we're thinking about metrics, when we're recording them, when we're reporting on them, so often I see metrics reported without any goals and targets, and that makes me sad, people. Metrics should always have goals and targets. If we're measuring data, we should always be thinking about how to drive performance and improvement through targets and goals. But additionally, I think it's important to realize that targets and goals aren't just there to drive the numbers. And service desks say to me, we don't want to be in that kind of competitive environment where we're just looking to meet or exceed targets or goals all of the time. Goals and targets provide a real baseline for where you want your service to be. And that doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, we have to answer this many calls, we have to do this, this, this. It can just be a general overview of where you want your services to be, where you aspire to be, what are the challenges. And as we saw on the previous graph with number of calls, we're actually going over our goal. So what we're saying is that we have the capacity to manage 2,500 calls every month. But actually now we're going above that. We're above our target. What's changed? What's happened? What does this mean for our future? Do we need more resource? Should we be looking at self-service, for example, to try and reduce that number of calls? Is this sustainable going forward? So goals and targets don't have to just be about driving extra performance. They don't have to just be about number crunching and trying to work up better figures all the time and really drive and improve going forward. They should be about a baseline, about understanding where your service desk is. And again, that's really easy to show on a graph, as I just showed you in the previous slide. But it's much harder to show on a spreadsheet. And I know some people do RAG reporting, red, amber, green, and that's great as well. Anything visual, anything that's going to provide people with a snapshot of where you are, and that includes, as I said, your own service desk team and the wider audience. And something I will touch on again, but please always, when we're thinking about goals, targets, visual, how to display information, think about the type of audience that it's intended for. It might make lots of sense to you, but would it make sense to someone who hadn't seen this before, or didn't understand anything about the service desk? So please do think about that. But absolutely fundamental, number 4 on the list, please do set goals and targets for metrics. Provide a great baseline, something for people to work towards if you're in that kind of environment or you want your service desk function that way, but also just provide a very, very clear indication of where you are now and where you aspire to be. Okay, number 5, not asking your vendor for help. Now, this is probably a little bit of a strange one for some of you out there, thinking about your ITSM tools and how difficult it is for you to extract data. But really, this whole mistake came about, and something that I really kind of tuned into was when SDI started working with vendors to actually improve their reporting capabilities of their tools. I think there is a very wide understanding now and agreement that it's really difficult for some service desks and users of some ITSM tools, and I will not name any names, to actually extract metrics information from their tools. It can be a really time-consuming and laborious process. I've seen examples of service desks where someone would take weeks every month to produce the metrics reports, and that's far too long. It's far too time-consuming. It does not need to be this way. So SDI approached this problem by talking to the vendors, understanding what their current challenges and capabilities were in this area, and we've actually worked with 2 vendors now to actually improve the reporting capabilities of their tools. And one of the vendors we work with, Cherwell Software, have provided a screenshot for us today of what their tool currently looks like and how they are extracting metrics information from their tool. So as you can see, all the things that I was talking about, very clear, concise, crisp information displayed in a really nice way, a really engaging way that makes it really easy. And the only reason that SDI have approved their tool and this reporting capability is that we've seen it in action, and it is really simple, really slick, really intuitive, really clear, crisp. It really is so easy to get that information out. Subsequent to this, we then went to some of the other vendors, and Sunrise Software as well have implemented a similar thing into their tool. If you're not a customer of either of those 2 suppliers that I've just identified, there's still absolutely no reason why you cannot go to your vendor and ask them for help in creating your metrics reports. Vendors understand it's a challenge. It's a challenge that doesn't need to be there. The tools have advanced now so that the information is a lot easier to extract. So please, if you are one of these people who spends a lot of time extracting metrics information, creating reports, please do talk to your vendor, see if there's any opportunity for them to make that process easier for you. We really don't need to be spending loads and loads of time pulling metrics out every month. It's terribly inefficient, and I'm sure that your vendor and your ITSM tool provider have got lots of good ideas on how they can make that so much easier for you. So if you're interested in any aspects of that, please do talk to us or talk to some of the guys. We've got a software showcase event coming up next week, I believe, actually. So if you'd like to go along and find out more about that, you absolutely can, and find out more, pick around, find out more about their tools and what they can do for you. Okay, number 6. So I've touched on this quite a lot, really, in terms of creating data and information, displaying it in the right way that's going to be attractive to the audience. But number 6 mistake is definitely not sharing metrics reports. So we put a lot of time and effort into creating visually appealing metrics reports that really tell us important information, but all too often I see that we don't actually share those reports in any meaningful way. People like to keep them to themselves, and sometimes that's because they're not comfortable with what the information's saying. Sometimes they think, actually, our performance hasn't been that good this month, so we won't share this one around, which is all well and good to an extent, but it really doesn't engender any kind of trust or engagement or opportunity for the business to help you out with those, to actually suggest some ways in which they could be improved going forward. So number 6 is definitely not share metrics reports. Don't be shy about your achievements, celebrate them, but also don't be shy about talking to the business about what you're currently achieving, because they might have some really good ways in which they can help you improve going forward. But this point number 6 actually speaks very clearly to how we present information. Make it visual, make it appealing, make it have that wow factor, make it so that the business is going to understand it, is going to use it, doesn't have to spend loads and loads of time digging through spreadsheets to find out the pertinent bits of information. So share metrics, make them engaging, provide them with some lovely context, make them look visually appealing, and then explain why people should be interested in seeing these. All too often on certification audit, we talk to customers and say, have you ever seen any reports from the service desk on how they're doing? And often they haven't, but you find that they're actually quite interested to see how they're doing. And the more information that we provide to people, the better that they can understand us, so that when they're complaining that, oh, it takes too long to get through to these guys, they then understand that, actually, I've seen the report and they're trying to handle 10,000 calls a month with 5 people. Therefore, it's not surprising that it takes so long. Maybe they need more people. So the more people that you can get engaged and understanding where you are, they could potentially become advocates for you, could potentially fight your corner, back your cause and say, well, no wonder it takes so long, they need more people down there. The more people that say that, perhaps the more likely we are to get the resources that we need going forward. So share metrics reports, create good engagement opportunities, and create some good relationships as well, which is going to be really beneficial moving forward. Okay, the last 2 for you here, and this is a really important one, I think. Number 7 is lack of context, and I'm going to talk about the graph momentarily. But really, when I'm talking about context, I'm talking about the story. There's absolutely no good having the best graph in the world displaying your information, but providing it with no context. When we don't tell the story of what the graph or data actually means, we're leaving it up to the interpretation of the audience, the reader, the viewer, to actually impose their own interpretation on it. And that's simply not good enough. It's not going to work, because they could come to conclusions that are simply not true, inaccurate, or that we don't want them to jump to. So a good example of this is this graph that I've provided here. It's a number of complaints. Now, on first glance, it looks like actually the service is getting much worse. Look at the number of complaints. It's escalating quite rapidly from August. It's always been below about 5-ish up until August, but look, exponential growth in those complaints. The service desk must be doing a terrible job. And that's a reasonable conclusion to come to, isn't it, just by looking at that. The number of complaints going up, more complainers, what has happened to that service desk? It must be terrible. However, the answer could be that the service desk has made it easier for people to complain to them. They've actually realized that complaints are really powerful because they're customers with something to say, and it's a great opportunity to manage their expectations and actually deal with the issue, to actually turn complaining customers into happy customers by saying, okay, I understand what you're saying, this is what we're going to do to fix that. So another interpretation of this graph could be that the service desk has made it easier for people to complain. They've created more channels of engagement. Before, you had to fill in a form that was hidden away somewhere on the intranet behind page after page after page, completely in an unintuitive place that people rarely find it, which is why so few complaints have been coming through. Now the people on the phone are saying, okay, if you'd like to, anything you're not happy with about the service today, would you like me to raise a complaint for you? Did you know you could fill in this form? They've provided a nice footer on every email correspondence that they send out where people can complain as well or provide their feedback. So that's why it's gone up. That's another interpretation. However, those 2 conclusions could equally be drawn, but without the context, without any description of what's happening underneath our graph, we're allowing people to draw their own conclusions from what we're providing them with. So number 7, absolutely vital. Let's tell the story of our graphs. Let's say what's actually happening. Let's not allow people to jump to their own conclusions. They could be right, but they could be wrong as well. This could be a perfectly mature, happy, functioning service desk that we see before us in this graph, or it could be one that the service has degraded quite significantly after August. Let's tell our own story and not leave it up to other people. So number 7, absolutely provide context, always tell your own story. Okay, the final one for today, and number 8 on our list, is not using metrics for service improvement. Absolutely fundamental that when we're measuring metrics, when we're recording data, when we're doing all these fabulous things with information, how we're actually using it, let's make sure that we're using it for the right reasons, and that is to continuously improve, to continuously drive service levels, to continually drive the own improvement and capabilities of our service desk. There's an old adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. So through measurement we can manage how our service desk is performing, we can set goals and targets to see where we are and where we aspire to be. We can feed all that information into continual service improvement programs. The most fundamental way that we can understand our service desk is through metrics. That's what I truly believe. Through that understanding we can then decide where our current strengths, weaknesses, opportunities lie. We can do some nice SWOT analysis and we can actually see where we are going forward. So absolutely number 8 on my list, and one just to round us off for today, is to use metrics in service improvement process, understand where we are, understand what we want to be, and then create the service improvement that sits behind that. Okay, so before we go on to the Q&A section, I just thought I'd do a really quick wrap up here. I believe metrics are incredibly powerful, but they have to be used in the right way. Don't measure just for measurement's sake. Make sure that you're displaying information in the right way. Don't leave the whims and the story of your metrics to other people's interpretation. Make sure that you're telling it yourself. And don't be tempted to follow the herd. Just because other people are measuring certain metrics doesn't mean you have to as well. The fundamental question you have to ask is, what does this mean for us? How is this important? Why should I spend my time measuring it? Don't measure certain metrics just because you feel you have to or you're obligated to. Measure them because they're important to you and tell you something. So always tell your story, people. Your service desk will have a story. Make sure you articulate that, make sure you share that, and make sure that all your information is displayed in the most visually appealing way possible that is going to engage the widest audience that you can. Okay, so for any more information on metrics, or if you'd like to go on one of our training courses, you absolutely can. You'll find all that information out if you go and visit our website, which is there for you, and the dates of the courses are there as well. So you've got 2 opportunities to get your metrics fixed. You can do that on the 17th of September, or you can do it on the 6th of March next year, and that's our training suite in Orpington, Kent. So I hope you have enjoyed today's webinar and a quick run through the 8 most common mistakes. So I'm going to hand back to Rob and see if we've had any interactivity of questions today. Rob?
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. It's very interesting. We've had a few questions, if you're ready for them.
Go, fire.
The first one's from Zoe. She says, no one seems interested in our metrics reports. Do you have any tips on how we can improve this? So I suppose it's looking at both marketing your service desk and what you were talking about earlier.
You're dead right, Rob. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question. I'm not surprised this one's come up, actually, because this is a really common thing when we're auditing and when I'm talking service desk, it comes up. They spend a lot of time putting these metrics reports together, and sometimes they followed the really good advice, well, I think it's good advice, of creating really visually appealing metrics reports, but they can't get anyone engaged. So what you have to do is you always have to answer the what's in it for me question. If you're asking for an audience or you're requesting an audience, you have to understand what value they're going to derive from this exchange or this opportunity to meet with you. For some people it's going to be cost. If you can say, I want to talk you through how we've reduced the cost of our service desk and how we've reduced our cost per call, you'll probably find it quite easy to attract an audience. But you almost, as Rob said, you must market yourself in the most positive light. So you want to share your success stories, but you also don't want to shy away from the bad things that are happening as well. Every area of your business will be under pressure, will have its own challenges, and it would be completely ridiculous to think that the service desk wouldn't have their own challenges too. But this is all about collaboration. It's about being honest, but it's about being positive as well. Don't shy away from the successes, celebrate them, but also don't try and hide your mistakes or where performance hasn't been quite as you expected. You'll often find a friendly ear if they understand, if the business understands your story, what you're trying to achieve. If they can see your passion, excitement and dedication to moving service forward, it'd be very unfortunate if you didn't find an audience to talk through those things with and help you improve in the future. So really good question. Thank you for that one, Zoe.
Ali's got a question. How many metrics is too many?
Good question, Ali. Yeah, so the fat guy on the bike, he really has overconsumed on something, and some service desks are gluttonous with metrics. They're consuming far too many metrics. How many is too many? How long is a piece of string? But I can tell you that SDI have a list of 28 indeed, performance measures that we look at in the new certification standard. So we're looking at 28 measures. Some people will say it's far too many, some will say it's far too few. I've seen service desks that measure over 100 metrics every month. That guy went very prematurely grey. That is not a job that I would recommend that anyone else undertake because it took him a considerable amount of time. How many is too many? It's going to be measures that don't actually tell you anything. Focus on the core values. Focus on the metrics that are providing you with real good information. Don't just use metrics because other people are measuring certain things. Use them to provide your own value. So how many is too many? I would say 100 is probably too many. We advocate 28. I would say there's a happy medium to be found somewhere between not measuring less than 10, but probably you don't want to be measuring more than 30 or 40. It's just too time consuming. But whatever provides you value is worth measuring. Just don't measure for measurement's sake. So great question, Ali. Thank you.
Brian's asking, what's the most important metric in your opinion to measure?
Good question, Brian. I did an event a couple of months ago now where this very same question was asked to the audience, what is the most important metric to measure? And the response came back overwhelmingly that it was adherence to SLA, so how we're actually performing against our SLA. And interestingly, we've done our own research on this and we found that the answer was exactly the same. The #1 metric for service desk, and indeed the business, because we asked the question to both parties, is how you're actually performing against your SLA. And perhaps really we shouldn't be that surprised at this, because SLAs are our contract with our end users that actually tell them the expectation of the service that they can provide. So if a service desk isn't meeting its SLAs, that it's not actually fulfilling its contractual obligations with its customers and its end users, it's not actually doing what it's promised to do. So perhaps there's no surprise at all that actually the service desk and the business are most interested in that. That's the commitment and they want to see how they're measuring up against that. Is that the most important metric? That's going to be down to your service desk, but in terms of what the service desk industry have told me and told us as an institute, that's exactly what they're thinking about at the moment. You wouldn't want it to be the only metric that you measure, but in terms of importance, that's definitely has been highlighted as #1. So thank you very much for that, Brian. Very good question.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got. So any other questions remaining, we'll put up on the blog at a later date, as Dan mentioned earlier. Just like to thank everyone for attending and thank Dan for presenting a very good, interesting webinar. And hopefully we'll see you on your next one.
Thank you, everyone.